Are we going to put the presentation on,
Yes.
Trish? Is that okay?
We will present desktop.
Look at this. Can you see the presentation?
Yep.
You can? Fantastic. Okay. Right, well, let's get into it. So my name's Emily, and Trish has been very kind to invite me to take this tutorial today. You may know me already from my work in the liaison team at the Polytech, but my background is really in research, and so it's really a pleasure to be available to provide some academic support to you on this program. So here we go. So that's me, and that's all of my contact details. So I'm going to be providing academic support to you on this program. That'll be in the form of this tutorial today, but if you want at any stage to meet with me individually, whether it's a Skype call or a face-to-face chat about your assignments or any aspect of your studies really, then I'd be very, very happy to be available for that. So don't be afraid to get in touch anytime is basically the message from me. So I'm based in Dunedin and I can be found at Student Success in the Hub. So I just want to tell you a little bit about my background, so you know how I've sort of come into this area. I'm from the UK originally. I've been here about 5 years in lovely New Zealand. And when I was in the UK, I did a PhD in Cardiff, in the School of Social Sciences. So my background is social sciences, and some of the examples I'll be using today are in tourism studies and psychology. That's my area. So it's been a while since I've kind of taught research skills, but when I was in Cardiff, I taught on undergraduate social psychology programs for about 4 years, and I'm still research active at the Polytech. So yeah, that's a little bit about my research background. And just while we're going through this today, I obviously can't see you, but feel free to just kind of interject, or there's only a small group of us, so just ask any questions as we go along. Okay? Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so before we get into the sort of the core content of the tutorial, I just wanted to make you aware, if you're not already, of this really great website that we have. This is the Student Services website that links from the main Polytech website. I hadn't got into it too much before preparing for this tutorial, but I was really pleasantly surprised at just how much information and support was on there. So that's the address there. It's linked to from the Moodle page for this program as well. And it's just got lots of really, really helpful resources on writing assignments, how to reference. It's got an APA referencing guide on there. And I was quite surprised actually. There was quite a few things on there that I didn't even know about. So I just think it's a good resource to have on hand when you're doing your assignments. So be aware of that. Okay, and so today's tutorial, what I thought we could go through is sort of quite comprehensive, from the starting point of finding information, searching for information that you can use in your assignments and your essays, then the process of reading and note-taking, which I think is often overlooked. Then we're going to look at referencing and citations. And finally, just a few tips on writing essays. So kind of from the beginning to the end of turning in your assignments. So I'm aware that for this program there are quite a few different styles of assignments that you're going to be expected to produce, including a reflective piece. So the advice I'm going to provide is quite generic, but hopefully you can use it in some of your other courses, and it'll be, good advice to take forward. So I'm going to start with searching for information. So when you're looking to write an assignment, you may be provided with a reading list that already gives you an idea of what sources you should look at. But when it comes to doing your own research to look for information, there's obviously a lot of different information out there. There are journal articles, there are books and ebooks, there might be technical reports or government reports, audiovisual materials, newspapers, magazines, and obviously lots and lots of websites. So it can be a little bit challenging thinking, if you're looking for references and looking for information, what sort of sources are you supposed to be using? I guess when it comes to doing academic writing, what's really important is two things. You're looking for sources that are going to provide the information that you need. So if you've been asked to write about particular theories or particular models of practice, then you obviously want to be reading information that's going to help you to answer those essay questions and help you to understand those theories better. But it's also really important to be aware that there are different sort of qualities of sources, so they're not all made equal. I've read quite a few essays in my time that start off with a few lovely Wikipedia quotes. And as much as we all love Wikipedia, it's a great democratic resource. Just be asking yourself, who has written this page or who has written this website? Is this official information? Has this been written by an expert in the field, or is it sort of quite general information? It's definitely okay to reference things like Wikipedia, but you wouldn't want your whole assignment to just be using that information, particularly those Wikipedia pages that have some issues on there. But the same also goes for things like journals. So journal articles tend to be the gold standard in academic writing. Books can be great, but when it comes to quality, they're not held as highly in regard as journal articles. But having said that, not all journal articles are made equal. Just be aware that there are journals out there that are not peer-reviewed. So what we're looking for is peer-reviewed journal articles. What that means is that when someone writes an article and submits it to that academic journal, it will go through a review process. So it will be usually just 2 or 3 reviewers will read through that piece of work. They'll be experts in their field. They'll provide feedback, and then usually there'll be a sort of redrafting process. So that doesn't happen with every journal, and there are different rankings of journals as well. So you can actually find ranking tables for education studies and other disciplines as well that will tell you which ones are the really good ones in your field, and which ones maybe will just be accepting quite a lot of papers just to kind of not exactly churn them out, but it might not have quite the same kind of quality assurance there. So just be aware when you're reading that you want to be using really good quality sources. Steve, was that you?
Talking about journals, yeah.
Yeah.
What are you referring to? In my only real experience of journals is like it's a commonly used word at school. You write in your journal, which I would say would be a pretty poor resource for pretty much anyone, unless they want to see pictures of 4-wheel drive doing donuts or flattened possums. Or the BMJ, like the British Medical Journal, which is a magazine. I mean, what are you saying?
Right, yeah, no, great question. No, I'm definitely not talking about the journals where you do your sketches and write your diary kind of thing. So what you're referring to, like the BMJ, British Medical Journal, that's what I'm referring to. So academic journals, I guess, yeah, you could think of them as magazines. They're published as sort of physical books, and they're collections of articles. So it might be published sort of 4 times a year, and they'll also be available online. So they're collections of academic articles, and that's what we call an academic journal. Does that make sense?
A couple of examples. Yeah, it does. It makes perfect sense. Could you give us, or could maybe somebody give us a couple of examples of journals that would be maybe valuable for us in this adult teaching environment? I'm sure it's something you can't do straight away, but maybe someone could post something online for us.
Yeah, I'll mention that to Trish and get her to, I don't know if you've got any reading lists that maybe already have. Trish, do you have examples of academic journals that these guys would be expected to look in for their work? Are there any sort of... No. The answer is no. we'll maybe have a little look. What I'm going to do later in this tutorial is actually take you through a website where I'll show you what a journal article looks like. I'll be using examples from my own field, sorry, but it'll still show you what it looks like basically. And yeah, we'll see if we can get any other resources up there. Okay?
Yep.
Yep, okay, awesome. Let's just move on. So the next thing is where can you find academic readings? Now, when I started my first degree, I was told to go and look for readings, in the library, which can be quite time consuming if you're looking for physical books, or in databases. So databases are search engines that allow you to look at a particular, you might have an education studies database, or you might have a medical journals database. So they're a little bit restricted because they only search, you get the really good science ones, for example, and they'll search all these particular science journals. Some people love using databases, but personally I find them really, really tricky to use. And I just want to make you aware of this absolutely amazing resource, which is Google Scholar. Google Scholar has helped me so much in my studies, and I think the power of it is that it doesn't restrict you to a particular discipline. It doesn't restrict you to just looking at medical things, just looking at education journals. It will search everything that's available on the internet. So this is what it looks like if you haven't been on there before. It's just like a Google search page really, but it's looking for academic publications. So it's looking for it'll look for books, it'll look for journal articles like we've just been talking about. So we'll be using that in a second. I'll take you through a couple of examples. And another area that you'll need to know about is the Robertson Library. Okay, so this is the Robertson Library page on the Student Services website that I was just talking about. So the Robertson Library is obviously, it's a physical library here in Dunedin, but it also has a lot of online articles and books that you can use. So this is a really good way to get some readings without having to go anywhere. And again, I'm going to show you how to use that. But before we do that, just making you aware of some different search techniques. So say you want to find out something about, well, I mean, do you have sort of a topic that you need to investigate? What would you be? So it's education, it's tertiary. So say you were really starting from the beginning and you want to see what other people had written about tertiary education. It's good to have an idea of how to go about searching, because there's obviously a lot of written information out there, a lot of publications, and you can do a search that comes up with 200,000 results. So it's good to be able to sort of narrow that down. So the simplest way of searching is keyword searching. We're just going to go through these in turn. There's also phrase searching, truncation and wildcard searching, and Boolean searching. So the first one is probably what most of us would do when we go to search for something, which is basically just typing in a word, clicking enter and seeing what it comes up for you. So that's a really simple way of searching, but it can also produce heaps and heaps of results, and a lot of those results won't necessarily be the readings that you're looking for. They might not be particularly relevant. So another way of kind of narrowing things down is phrase searching. So phrase searching is when you've got two or more words and you put quotation marks around that phrase, and then it will search for readings and articles that have those words in exactly that order. So I'm just taking some of these examples from the learning support website. So the example they have is nuclear-free policy. So if you just did a search for the word nuclear, it's going to come up with an enormous number of readings. But if you put nuclear-free policy with those quotation marks around it, then it's going to just narrow your search down to more specifically what you're looking for. Then another one here is truncation and wildcard searches. So these are search techniques where you use a symbol to represent possible additions to a search word. So this technique varies depending on what search engine you're on. So I've had kind of mixed results on Google Scholar. Sometimes when you go to a library search engine, it'll it'll have some explanation underneath saying you can use these symbols, but you can see common truncation symbols are an asterisk and a question mark. So what this means is, say you're looking for articles to do with legislation. Legislation is one word, but you might have articles that talk about legislators or legislature or legislating. So what a truncation search does is you take the shun at the end of the word off and put your truncation symbol, so in this case we'd use a question mark, and then when you do your search, it's not just going to be looking for that word legislation, but it will look for all these other varieties of the word as well. So that can help you to, again, just avoid missing a really important article about what you're trying to research that maybe is just use a slightly different variety of your word. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep, cool. And then wildcard searches are really similar. So that would use a question mark to replace a character in a word. So what have we got here? So it's for when there's only one letter difference inside a word. So the example we've got here is the difference between the word woman and women. So if you put the question mark in place of the A or the E, it will search for both woman and women without you having to kind of type it twice. So I mean, these are search techniques that you may or may not need to use, but it's kind of useful to know that you've got those options, because sometimes you might be looking for something and it's just not coming up with anything. So there are a few techniques there. And the final one here, Boolean searching, which I was curious as to where that term came from. It's from someone called George Boole, who did algebra. So this is a sort of a technique that's taken from algebra, and this is when you use the words and, or, and not in your search terms. So, for example, all these examples from the website are all about nuclear, so that's why we keep seeing these. So if you use the word and in your search, so for example, you could type in New Zealand and nuclear free, then it's going to come up with search results that come up with both. Now, usually when you're using a search engine, that's kind of the default. So even if you didn't have that word there, they're kind of set up that they would search for all of those terms. Slightly more useful then are these other two, so or. So you might want to look at nuclear free or anti-nuclear. So it's kind of at least one of those terms, not necessarily both. Okay. So you might have an article where it says nuclear free in the title, but not anti-nuclear. So it will come up with one of those. And then the last one there is not. So that's when you want to search for a specific term and not something else. So you want to find out about nuclear power, but you're not interested in nuclear weapons. So I think out of all of those, the not is probably one of the most useful ones, because that will exclude everything that's about nuclear weapons from your search. So that'll cut out a lot of readings that you are not interested in. Okay. There we go.
Oh, could you just go back to that one? I was
Yep.
just, that'd be right. Thank you.
So if you're taking any notes, I'll make sure that all these slides get circulated to you. And I think we're recording as well, so you'll be able to go through all of these again. Is that okay, Steve?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, cool. What I want to do now is we're going to switch out of this into the internet. I want to sort of take you through a couple of examples. So I'm going to look at 2 examples of papers. So these are from my area, tourism, and I'm going to look at an example of a paper where there's full access on the Robertson Library, so it's actually really easy to get to it, and also one that you don't have access to on the Robertson Library, but you need to do what's called an interloan request. So it's a little bit more tricky, but I think it's worth going through just to show you that if you're looking for an article and it doesn't come up at first, it doesn't mean that you can't get to it. Okay, so can we switch into... No, sorry. I just need to bring up Google Scholar. Oh.
Sorry.
awesome. Thank you. Okay. Can you see the web page?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Yes.
Google Scholar. And can I bring up another tab there without getting rid of that bit there?
That's a good question.
Can we do maybe instead of your calendar or something, or the... Oh.
If you right click on one of the tabs and just duplicate it, then you'll open up a new tab.
Okay. It's just that we've got a bar for the saying currently presenting, covering the tabs.
Yeah, just right click on. Yeah, there you go. And if you
there we go. Yeah, we can just have two on there. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Awesome. Okay. You must let me know if you're already, comfortable with doing this, but I just think searching for things can be it can be tricky. So library NZ. Okay.
And you're good at finding TV remotes, because that gets me.
No, I'm actually pretty bad at that, I'm afraid, Steve. So
Dang.
let's hope I'm better at searching for articles. Okay, so what I'm sharing here is my own experience. I think it's really important to develop your own ways of finding information, whatever works for you. But I think it's worth knowing that you probably shouldn't always start by searching on the Robertson Library, because we are not subscribed to all journals. And if you start off your search here, you might think, oh, I wanted to read that, but it's not there. Probably won't be as much your experience in education. It's been a bit frustrating for me in tourism because journals are very expensive to subscribe to. So I always start my search in Google Scholar because I just find it so comprehensive. It just searches everything. So I'm going to put my tourism hat on and have a think about what I might want to read. So I'm thinking I'm really interested in tourism and I want to find out about tourism in Kenya. Okay, so I put tourism in Kenya, click enter, and see what that comes up with. So this is what Google Scholar shows you. Okay, so it'll come up with this list. It'll have the title at the top, and the name of the author, the name of the journal, so that's the collection of articles, the date, and then the publisher. And what you can see down the side here is if it automatically comes up with a PDF, or this one here, a Targo Poly article link, you are in luck. You can just click straight through to that and it will provide you with that article. So you can see here we've got 189,000 results, which is quite a lot. So if you want to narrow that down a little bit, we've got some tools we can use to the side here. So you might think, well, hang on a minute, this was published in 1996. We've got 1996 here again, 95. I want something more up to date. I want to know what's being published right now about tourism in Kenya. So we can go to this one here on the side and click. We want to see anything published since 2018, really up-to-date articles. Okay, and so this shows you everything that has been published this year, and this is the one that I found as an example of something that was available on the Robertson Library, the effect of terrorism on demand for tourism in Kenya. So because we're all logged in here, you can see to the side here a Targo Poly article link. If we click on that, it is going to hopefully, thinking about it. Redirecting to resource, that looks good. Here we go. If we just close this side window here, it should bring up the article. Here it was. Okay, so it's brought up a little summary of the article, and then you want to look for the download PDF. If you click on download PDF, here we go. So this is what a journal article looks like. And the beauty of this is that you can download it, you can print it, and then it's yours to keep and refer to. Okay. If for whatever reason, when you're looking at, we'll just go back here, back a few steps. Here we go. If you're looking for something in that Otago Poly article doesn't come up to the side, what you can do is go onto the Robertson Library and have a look to see if it's there. So this is the Robertson Library webpage, and what we'd need to go to is down here. We've got Library Search. So if we click on Library Search, again it's doing some thinking about it, loading the page, and here we go. So this is how to search electronically on the Robertson Library. And here, down here, we can see some of the search techniques that we were just talking about, the Boolean searching, search tips, phrase searching. So this is how this search engine operates. So for that article, probably the easiest thing would be to just search for the title there. So effect on terrorism. There can't be that many articles with that start with that name, so I'm going to do a phrase search. Effect of terrorism. So that's a phrase search there with the quotation marks. I'm going to click search and see if it comes up with it. Okay, we've got 82 results. That's quite a lot. Ah, there you go. First one there. So again, if you click through on that one, it should come up with, so you always have to close this one. For some reason that stops it loading. And there we go, back to the same page, get the PDF that way.
I got $1 says if you put that in there without the quotation marks, it'd give you the exact same result though, wouldn't it?
Oh, shall we give it a go?
Go on, I've got a bright
come on, let's do
$20 here
it.
for you.
Let's have a look. Right, okay, we've taken the quotation marks off.
Whoa,
Okay, drum roll. Let's see. Oh, look at that. 254,000 results. Ah, but you're right. It is the first one there.
But to be fair, you had just loaded that up, so the wee mouse on the computer was thinking about it.
Yeah, it might have been. So that's the thing. I mean, sometimes it's good to know about different ways of searching, but you don't always need that. I think it's sometimes easiest to just start off with either a phrase search or a keyword search, see what comes up, and if it's giving you too many results, then think about how can you narrow that down. Okay.
Ooh, that first article down looks good.
Oh, it does. Are we all going to go away and read that maybe? I actually haven't read this one, so I have no idea what it is. So that's the most straightforward scenario really, is that you want to read something and we have access to it. But I just wanted to show you one more thing, because like I said, there are some journals that we're not subscribed to, but it doesn't mean that you can't read that. So I'm going to look for something else here. I'm going to look for, how did I do this before? So I'm going to look for an article here. Okay, I've got the custom range anytime. Okay, so this is one of my articles. Sorry, I hope that's not too narcissistic. But I was just looking for an example. And when I first searched, it didn't come up with this. You can actually read it as HTML online. But this journal here, Tourism Geographies, is a journal that you can't access on the Robertson Library. So if I look here, back here, and do poor but happy, search, then you can see that it doesn't come up there at all. And I'm just saying how to
I hear it was such a good article that libraries can't keep it in stock. That's what I heard.
Sorry?
I heard it was such a good article that libraries can't keep it in stock.
I'm not sure about that, but it just comes down to the, like I say, the really expensive to. Oh, we're actually running out of time a little bit here, aren't we? Oh my goodness. I wonder whether I might just leave that for now and put something on how to do the interloan request as a separate thing, because I think we're going to run out of time otherwise. But that's hopefully for most of your resources, that's how you'll find it, and I'll provide you with something to how to do the interloan request. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, now where were we? Slideshow from current slide. Okay, I need to speed up a little bit, guys. Right, okay. So that's hopefully that's useful about how to search for information. The next part of the process that I think sometimes gets a little bit overlooked is how you read these sources. There's just this kind of assumption that you're given a reading list, you find the articles, and then you just kind of read them, and then you write your assignment. But I think that the way that we read is so important. You can potentially spend or waste a lot of your time just reading, and then you forget all of it. Because, I mean, journal articles, for example, they're quite long. They're sometimes 10,000 words long. If you sort of read that from start to finish, how are you going to recall that information, and what are you kind of reading it for? So I think it's really important to always read with a purpose. Unless you have plenty of time or you think you're really going to enjoy something, I think it's most valuable when you read something thinking, I want to get this particular bit of information from this piece of writing. So when you're reading your resources, think about what information are you looking for in this text. Are there any particular keywords that you're looking for? Are you looking for some theory, or are you looking for maybe the results of an experiment or a study? Depending on what you're looking for, it'll guide you to a particular part of the text. So what sections of the text will contain the information that you're looking for? So for example, if you just want to find out about the results of an experiment or a piece of research, do you necessarily have to read the literature review at the beginning, which will be talking about all of the theory and all of the literature that researcher has reviewed? You may want to, but it may be quicker and more efficient just to go to the results section of that paper that will give you the information that you need. So this might not be the best advice. I don't know if Trish will agree with me, but I think you don't always have to read the whole document, and you can get really smart about your reading. We're all busy people, you're busy people, and if you're just reading everything cover to cover, it can take a long time. So you can learn to scan readings for relevant information and keywords. So if you know that you're looking for a particular theory, you can kind of just quickly go through that text and be looking for that keyword that you're looking for, and that can be a way of speeding things up. And it's also a good idea to focus on the abstract. So if it's a journal article, it will have a little summary at the top, a couple of hundred words that basically describes what the paper is about. So again, that's a really good thing to look at before you read the whole paper, because if you just launch into that article without reading the abstract, you might find it's actually completely useless information. But if you read the abstract, it gives you a little bit of an idea of what they're going to be talking about. So the abstract, the introduction, and the conclusion, those are the summary areas of a piece of writing. So they can sometimes give you, the gist of what is being talked about in that article. And sometimes that's all you need. If you just want to be able to say, so-and-so has written about this topic, you'll know that from the introduction and the conclusion. I think this is super important, finding a system for processing your readings. Again, to make sure that when you read something, if you then come back to that reading in sort of 3-4 months' time, you're not going to have to read it again from the beginning, because again, that's not a good use of your time. I personally find it easier to print my readings. I know it's not particularly sustainable. We're meant to be doing everything electronically or digitally, but I just kind of work better with paper. So if you find it easier to print your readings, that can be something to do. know quite a few people who highlight key ideas or quotes in their text with an actual highlighter, kind of going through, and that can be quite good then when you're scanning back through your article to see those bits of information that you've highlighted as being really important in that article. You can also write little notes to yourself in the margin if you've printed it out, or electronically, explaining key ideas. I think it's quite good when you're writing notes to write them to yourself, speak to yourself, so that you're kind of explaining and unpacking those ideas, and it's putting it in language that you understand. And this is a point that Trish and I talked about, which is the absolute golden one. Copy key points or quotes directly into your essay template. It is such a good tip, seriously. It will just, if you come across a quotation that you think, wow, that really expresses that concept really well, or this is a really great idea, this is something I want to talk about in my essay, don't just leave it in that reading and then wait several weeks to then come back to it, because you're just going to have to go through it all over again. Have a Word document where you're just sort of constantly, typing out or copying and pasting little notes and quotations. And that will then make it easier to start your assignment as well, because you're not starting with a blank page then. You've already got these ideas that you've taken from other writers, other researchers. So I wanted to show you an example of the system that I use. I do not have the best handwriting in the world, so it's sometimes a little bit challenging to read my notes, but this is how I go through an article, basically. I print it out, so then I can read it in the sun. I don't have to be in front of a screen. I'll take my highlighter and I will highlight the sections that I think express an idea that I think is important or interesting. I'll sometimes underline bits if it's particularly good. And then you can see the little notes in the side. I draw little pictures to myself. I'll make a heading. I'll write little notes. And this is something that I read, crikey, I don't know, 7 years ago or something, but I've still got it, and it means that any time I want to look at that article again, I don't have to start from scratch, I don't have to start from the beginning. I've done the hard work. I can just go through that document and just be able to pick out those important bits. So again, that's what works for me. It might not work for you, but I've just found it a really good way of saving time. Okay, so on to the next. Any questions at this stage?
Not from me, thanks.
No? Okay,
I'm
all good.
intrigued by Swedish time geography, but we're probably running out of time for you to explain that to me.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to do a separate tutorial on the Swedish time geography. Yeah, a bit of a random one. I'm not quite sure what that's about either, but I know where to read in the article to find out about Swedish time geography.
Obviously your notes weren't thorough enough.
Oh, well, maybe. Like I say, this was a while ago I read that one, so maybe I need to develop my system a little bit. Okay, referencing and citations. So this is just a screenshot of some references there. The ones at the top are in-text citations. That's what you write in the body of your writing. And then we have a reference list at the end. So what is referencing and why do we do it? Well, referencing is basically, it's a standardized way of acknowledging the ideas, opinions, and theories of authors that you've used in your work. So you can imagine if you had a really good idea and maybe you wrote something about it and you're really proud of that, you wouldn't then want someone else going and writing about that idea as if it was their idea. So that's the basic idea with referencing, is that you want to give credit to those people who have done work that you're then using in your work, and just acknowledging them, really. So there are different systems of reference. Oh, so hang on, we've got a little diagram I've taken here. So when you're thinking about, so referencing and citation, it's basically the same thing, but citing is, you talk about citing an author in your, if you're writing a sentence and you sort of, if you include a quotation, so and so said this, then you would cite them after that. So this is a little flow chart that you can look at to think about, should I cite someone else's work? So is it another person's idea or theory? If it's not a theory or an idea that you can attribute to someone in particular, if it's sort of just common knowledge, or if it's your own opinion, then you don't have to cite. So you don't have to cite yourself, because otherwise you'd be citing yourself throughout your whole essay, which would be a bit much. So common knowledge, general knowledge, that's all fine. You don't have to cite that. But if it is someone else's theory, then the next section down, you have to ask yourself, is it a quote? So have you taken a section from someone else's book or their article, and you've lifted that whole section, you've quoted them in your work? If it is, then you need to put double quotation marks around that text, and then you need to put their name, and I'll show you an example of this in a second, but their name and the date of their publication afterwards. So you can't just put a quote in and not let anyone know where that quote's come from. Because the whole point of referencing really is sort of acknowledging other people's ideas, but you're also then helping other people who read your work to know, to be able to follow up those references themselves. So for example, if you write an essay for Trish and give that to her, and you put this really cool quote in, she might think, oh, that's a really interesting idea. I'd quite like to go and read that myself and see what that book's all about. But if you don't put a reference in, she's got no way of following up and finding that resource for herself. So you're kind of helping other researchers out as well. You can find lots of really interesting readings from finding what other people have quoted, basically. So you can either quote or you can paraphrase. So if you don't, you've got to make sure you don't put too many quotes in your assignments, because otherwise it just looks like you're just relying on other people's ways of expressing ideas. So sometimes you need to learn how to put things into your own words, that's paraphrasing. But if you paraphrase someone else's ideas, you still need to include a citation. So even if you're not quoting, you're putting in your own words, you still need to acknowledge that this is someone else's theory or someone else's idea. Okay. So this is what an in-text citation looks like. So you can see here we've got, so this could be an example from an essay. Key causes of economic deprivation include low income or unemployment, which are often the result of, open quotation, poor qualification levels and lack of basic skills, close quote. Then the citation is this here. So you've got a quotation, and then you're acknowledging whose words those are. So this is, oh crikey, I've chosen one I can't pronounce. Thake and Sobach, something like that. So those are two authors, and they've written something in 1993, and you've taken this quotation from page 18. So what we can tell from an in-text citation is who wrote it, when they wrote it, and what pages it's come from. You only need to put the page number if you're quoting or if it's a very specific idea. So if they've talked about something on one particular page, you might want to put the page number. If you're saying that Thake and Sobach have a general theory that you're referring to, you don't have to put the page number because you're sort of referring to their whole book or article. At this stage, we don't actually know what type of writing this is. We don't know if it's a book, a chapter in a book, an article. We have no idea, and that's why we have a reference list. Okay. So when it comes to referencing styles, there are quite a few styles out there. These are a few that you might see. APA, so that's American Psychological Association, and Harvard, they're two of the most common, and the one used at OP is APA. So that's the one to use, and it does say that in your assignments as well to use this system. The main thing with referencing is really just being really consistent. If you start changing, putting things in bold and italics and, kind of doing what you want with it, it just makes it really difficult for other people to follow your references. So it's just about being really systematic. And on that website I showed you at the beginning, there are really good resources for using the APA system because it's kind of different for each resource. If you reference a book or a journal article or a website, it's a slightly different way of writing that for each one. This is an example of a reference. So what I'm talking about here is, so when you've got your essay, throughout your essay you'll be referring to other people's work. You might have quotations, you might be referencing, so-and-so wrote this theory and all this model of practice. So you would have your in-text citations, like we've just said, acknowledging those people in the text. And then at the end of your assignment, you have your reference list, sometimes also called a bibliography. So that comes at the end of your assignment. It's really important to check that everything you've cited in the text, in the body of your essay, also appears in your reference list. This is a really common mistake, that you'll say, so-and-so's theory, you've got your in-text citation,